Chasing after the California dream, we take a look at the shrinking middle class in the Golden State. And trying to save lives, the program connecting homeless people to outreach workers and the challenges in getting them to accept help. Plus, getting a second chance behind bars, the philosophy behind the program that teaches inmates at Donovan. Evening Edition starts now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. On this first day of the new year, we look back at the California dream and the people who are trying to make it work in the Golden State. California has the 6th largest economy in the world, but that ranking may disguise an economic fault line, the decline of California's middle class. As part of our statewide collaboration looking at the California dream, KPBS's Amitha Sharma reports.
There is probably no single area holding so much of charm and beauty and the good things of life as Southern California.
That 1953 travel film clip underscored the state's allure, one that Chapman University presidential fellow Joel Kotkin remembers well.
Well, the California dream of that era was that you could come here, you could build your career, you could raise a family, you could buy a nice house with a pool, and actually do better than where you were before.
But today, access to the dream is slipping away. The numbers help tell the story. California has lost 500,000 more residents than have come into the state, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's annual population estimates program. High housing costs are driving people out. Kotkin says families used to pay 3 times their income for a home. Now, that figure has jumped to as high as 10 times.
California basically opened the doors and kicked my family out.
Kelly Rudiger and her family left California for Texas 1 year ago.
We couldn't afford to live there. The cost of living was high, taxes were high, the government wasn't serving us, and we felt that we needed to find somewhere where we can better provide for our family.
Kotkin says the fact that people like Rudiger, a realtor, and her IT manager husband are moving out of the state is alarming.
But when you look at the data, actually, who's leaving the most are young families, people 35 up to their early 50s, very often with children, but certainly making a very middle class living between, let's say, $100,000, $200,000.
The Public Policy Institute of California classifies the middle income range between almost $50,000 and $174,000. And since 1970, California's share of the middle class fell from 60% to just over 50%.
Even though, as a whole, our economy is successful in terms of what it's producing and the amount of wealth and value that it's producing, we're not seeing that translate into incomes that really support families here in San Diego and across California.
Brownell says a thriving middle class is oxygen for the economy.
When people have stable middle-class incomes, it means that they've got money in their pocket to consume all kinds of goods.
Kotkin says California's middle class started to dwindle when the Cold War thawed in the 1990s, devastating the state's aerospace industry. He says real estate and construction jobs followed. More recently, jobs in the business sector have taken a hit.
Toyota, Nissan, Fluor, Occidental Petroleum, these are companies that have employed large numbers of people for a long period of time here in Southern California and now are leaving.
Brownell says the state has not done well when it comes to replacing those middle-class jobs that came along with these companies. Instead, California is creating highly skilled, high-paying tech jobs in Silicon Valley and in the biotech industry in San Diego. But these industries tend to create a demand for low-paying service jobs like gardeners, dry cleaners, and nannies. Even people working in higher-paying positions are struggling to survive. Sharon Mintz runs a floral arrangement business. She says she offers free meals to her employees and has increased their pay from $15 to $20 an hour over the past few years, but still cannot hold on to them.
it works, and then the rent goes up, and then we offer a little more, and then groceries go up. It feels like we're always trying to catch up with the reality of what they're dealing with in a day-to-day situation.
Kotkin says California is headed away from the enchantment of the 1950s toward a more primitive time.
Today, we have a society which over time is becoming more and more feudal, with very rich, very successful, some of the richest people in the history of the world at the very top, and then a diminishing middle class. And what's most frightening is what's happening to young people. You have young people, some of them with college educations, working at Uber, working at Starbucks, essentially barely making it.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
This year, we took a look at a pilot program in San Diego County that tries to help hundreds of unhealthy homeless people. As KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy explains, easing them off the streets is a daunting process.
It's a hot July afternoon as outreach workers Angelica Garcia and Camille Cross set off on a search for a homeless couple near a riverbed in Chula Vista.
To the left is where she said they're at.
The couple is on a list of 1,050 names of people in need of intensive care management who frequently use emergency rooms.
They said behind a brick wall, so I'm assuming it's this one right here.
They're supposedly somewhere in this vast abandoned industrial space littered with graffitied cinder blocks and debris.
I see some wood over there.
The man and woman called the outreach workers last night to let them know of their new location after disappearing off the radar a few weeks ago.
Julie?
No, she's next door.
Next door?
Behind the next wall?
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
Around the bend, they find a shack made of scraps of plywood.
How you doing, girl?
I'm okay.
In it are 46-year-old Julie Black and 52-year-old Philip Wright.
Hey,
Yo, Philip, what's up, bro?
How you? Oh my gosh.
Hey, man, and it's
swollen.
swollen.
For years, the couple has avoided shelters, spending their nights hidden from everyday life.
So we came down to the river bottom to be, out of sight, out of mind.
Black struggles with social anxiety. It's why her first encounter with the outreach team 3 months ago didn't go well.
I screamed at them to get away from me.
Now, after a dozen visits from Garcia and Cross, the couple is warming up to the idea of getting help. They realize their unhealthy lifestyle has reached a critical point.
They keep us up on hygiene, clothing, and appointments, and they just do everything for us.
Both struggle with drug addictions and chronic illnesses. Wright was in the ER last night with an infected hand.
I go to the doctors a lot because if I have something wrong, I go to the doctor.
Connecting with people like Wright and Black is the goal of the new Whole Person Wellness program.
Thank you, Philip.
Dozens of outreach workers have been hired to work patiently and persistently to help the most desperate people in the population transition from sleeping on the streets to finding mental health care and addiction treatment, and eventually supportive housing.
The list is just over 8,000 potential folks that are eligible.
Andrew Barajas is with People Assisting the Homeless, or PATH. He oversees some of the outreach teams. The first step is meeting people where they are and creating face-to-face relationships. Referrals often come from hospital emergency rooms, psychiatric providers, and homeless outreach teams.
If you can imagine experiencing severe mental health issues or a substance use disorder or addiction, it can be very challenging to open up to someone who's a complete stranger.
Barajas says building trust can take weeks or months.
Some of our most intense cases, we're able to meet with them 3 times per day. And there are cases that are in crisis where you have suicidality, where you have extreme polysubstance use issues, where you've got extreme mental health symptoms that maybe aren't treated yet.
During the process, the team of case managers and health workers conduct a comprehensive assessment while connecting people to appropriate medical care and stability.
We're very good at empathizing, but also empowering, so that we're teaching and looking for skill building opportunities so that someone can become self-sufficient.
48-year-old Jacqueline Van Ellen started the Whole Person Wellness program a few months ago. She recalls when her outreach workers encouraged her to leave her corner on an El Cajon street.
At first I go, oh my gosh, I don't want to go. Like, I was afraid to go. And then I told myself, I'm going through this, I'm going to do this.
She moved into her permanent supportive housing apartment last week after 2 decades of sleeping on the streets and in cars with mental and chronic illnesses.
I can't tell you how blessed I feel.
She says getting to this point has included classes to help her transition into society, medical care, and encouragement from her outreach team.
I wouldn't have done it without any of them. All of them had a place in my recovery into living in a home.
Ready? Yeah. All right.
Julie Black and Philip Wright are also hopeful about moving forward with the program. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
San Francisco's Tenderloin is one of the poorest neighborhoods in the country. It's also a place where many residents, including thousands of kids, don't always feel safe. KQED reporter Farida Jabala Romero introduces us to the volunteers who are working to change that.
Tenderloin is a beautiful, beautiful place. Multi-layered, multicultural, and just a lot of great people. Unfortunately, we do have some issues, and some of those issues include drug use, drug sales, and drug use.
You know, the methadone clinic closes at 3 o'clock, and so there are usually people hanging out, and sometimes people are actively dealing and using.
If you ask the average person how they feel about walking through the Tenderloin, Turk area right here, most people would say that it's okay, but there would always be that but. So you can imagine what a 4, 5, or 6-year-old must feel.
There are a lot of kids here and a lot of after-school programs. We just make it known to everybody that kids are coming, kids are about to come. And they see us. We have very clear, indicators of who we are. We have green vests, we have our signs. And for the most part, everybody says, oh, it's kid time, and they take a break.
All right, let's get ready to walk, guys.
The whole idea is to provide a safe environment for the kids walking through what is really a high-risk area.
There'll be drug dealers when we get down there. They'll be all around the park, and then as soon as we set up, they leave to go somewhere else because they know that we're trying to do something good for the neighborhood. There would be all these people would always be right here, drinking or shooting up.
We need more for our kids. It was really a volunteer effort with residents and various organizations kind of fulfilling this promise to the community members.
Exactly, have a safe day. We don't want to make things personal. We don't want to get up in someone's face and say, hey, I need you to move. Hey, we got some kids coming. We need a little bit of room for the kids. We always want to de-escalate a situation. So,
Thank you. Come on, big boys and girls, come on. Good job. I'm a part of my community. I love my community.
Thank you so much.
I've been on both sides of the fence. See, I've been sitting outside. I've been homeless. I've been on drugs. I've done it all. And now I'm on the other side of the fence where I'm clear-headed, and I want to do everything I can to help my environment and my community. I can do what I can for my neighborhood today, and that's what I do.
Coming out here every day I come out here, and I'm doing something positive. I'm helping other people, and that's what really makes me feel like I'm doing something right.
Hey, we walking, let's go. Let's go, we walking, let's go.
If we can't have a safe environment for our kids, then, I don't know what's wrong with our society if you can't at least do that.
That's what they're going to think of when they think of their walk home from school, is us, is people, asking about them, caring about them, and not feeling this fear or, seeing scary things.
We've reported extensively on the political approach to ending homelessness. Tonight, we get a little more personal. KPBS reporter Amita Sharma looks at the science of empathy.
Get out of here.
Last year, I interviewed a woman named Cheryl Taylor. The 63-year-old wore pink bunny ears on top of her head. She was living on a San Diego sidewalk after being evicted from her home. She said the people living in the luxury high-rise across the street didn't know her story. They'd never asked. They just yelled.
You're just dirty trash. Why do you have to be here?
It looks like a 45-minute plus.
Then this spring, I interviewed Chad Bordas. He was working 16-hour days as an Uber Lyft driver and selling cars online. He was also living in his car.
How do we get to a point where we devalue human life? To where, it's okay if we step over homeless people, or, if you're sleeping in your car, it doesn't matter.
I know a lot of Californians worry about the state's growing homelessness crisis. Some are concerned with health risks, crime, and falling property values. Others work day in and day out to try to improve things. Shelter workers, advocates, police, paramedics, citizens, and politicians. It got me wondering about our collective capacity for empathy. And I looked to science for some answers.
Empathy is probably as native as any other sensory modality, hearing or vision or taste.
UC San Diego neuroscientist William Mobley says you can actually see empathy in brain imaging.
If you look at the parts of the brain that are activated when we feel pain or internal distress or sadness or even surprise, the same regions in the brain that are activated by those kinds of internal stimuli are also activated, at least they overlap with regions that are activated when we see pain or surprise in another.
Mobley says research shows people's own experiences can foster empathy. So can the way we talk about people who are struggling. It reminded me of Riverside Mayor Rusty Bailey. He refuses to call people living on his city streets homeless.
I've been calling them neighbors without homes.
How you doing, girl?
Mobley says once you change the language, the mindset can follow.
Your brain is saying, wait a minute, these are our friends, so that means that they're people that we like, that we support them, that we want to be part of what's good for them.
And that kind of thinking, practiced enough, can spark a powerful chain reaction.
Empathy changes everything. It absolutely prevents me from ignoring or diminishing the value of another human being. And if everybody's of immense value, how can I ignore anybody in suffering? And if I can't ignore anybody who's suffering, well, then the world just changes.
I ask Mobley Chad's question. Why does it seem that so many folks lack empathy?
It may just be that we're so darn busy. We're so beset by other stresses that it's hard for us to really be the empathic people that we want to be and maybe even aspire to be.
Researchers are looking at whether empathy can be inspired. A study published in the journal Clinical Psychology Review in 2011 found that loving kindness meditation and compassion meditation may intensify activity in the brain that relate to empathy. Another study by Stanford researchers in 2015 showed that the extended practice of loving-kindness meditation can spark behavioral changes linked to empathic responses.
Empathy is a personality trait similar to resilience, optimism, and all of these traits are partly genetic, only about 35 to 50%, which means that 50 to 65% is not genetic. It is affected by environment and behavior, which means it can be modified, which means it can be improved.
UC San Diego psychiatrist and neuroscientist Dilip Jeste says even something as simple as keeping a gratitude diary can stimulate empathy.
We need it for our survival. Without empathy, human species will not survive.
It is a lesson many people, especially homeless people, have learned for themselves. Remember the woman with the bunny ears, Cheryl Taylor, whose address was San Diego's streets? She said she wore those pink bunny ears to make people smile. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
This story is part of our statewide California Dream collaboration. For more, head to kpbs.org/CADream. Students at a garden in Encanto are growing more than just vegetables. They're planting the seeds for a possible career path. KPBS video journalist Chris Arciaga takes us behind the scenes of the Second Chance Youth Garden.
Okay, so we're preparing this one, and then we're going to plant here and here.
We want to give them practical experience, the on-the-job experience. It creates an opportunity for them to explore a variety of career pathways, not only in the how do we work together as a team and showing up on time, but also what are the skills that we've learned about gardens, what are the skills that we've learned about working together.
I'm learning how to harvest, I'm learning how to grow plants that I never knew how to grow. Grab that. And then there's one right here.
And this is a great environment where they're busy outside every day, but they're also learning those career-related skills that they can, with confidence, go to an interview in the future.
I need a break. I actually took the time to give back to the community and to actually grow something that I can grow at home. My mom, she got a new house and I plan on planting stuff there. And it has like a big backyard. And she said I can put like flowers or vegetables so she doesn't have to go grocery shopping.
It's presenting them the world of work. It's giving them a real opportunity to learn those skills, maybe get it wrong here. Getting it wrong is okay, because when they get it wrong, they learn about something and about themselves. So when they're in a real life situation in front of an employer, what they've learned here will really help them secure the beginning of their careers for their future.
Prisoners have long taken correspondence courses to earn college credits behind bars, but inmates at Donovan State Prison are participating in a rare face-to-face program. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks shows us how inmates earned their associate degrees.
Hey, Quinteros, what's up, man?
The students filing into John Reeder's English 99 class carry their books and pens in large plastic bags instead of backpacks. They wear blue prison uniforms and faded black tattoos, but those are just about the only clues this classroom is in a prison. College pennants line the walls, a whiteboard lays out the day's agenda, and the students quickly take their seats, except for one who's eager to discuss the text.
Well, and here's the thing, he keeps making mistakes over and over again. And you have all these decades of experience. He's trying to capture when he was a dumb 20-year-old.
Reeder says that's common for this group.
The level of critical thought and the commentary is just much higher than I would typically get in a room, teaching the same class to a room of like 18 to 21-year-olds. These guys draw from a pretty remarkable pool of experiences, and they're able to leverage that a lot in our classroom.
The class is on reading and writing analytically and more or less marks the halfway point on the student's journey to an associate's degree. Things move a little slower behind bars, so they're expected to graduate in 2020, but their degrees will be no different than those earned outside of prison. Reeder says his class is just as rigorous, drawing on psychology, philosophy, and poetry to explore themes of education and power.
The idea is that most folks, I would assume, come into the classroom, if they're going to yoke ideas of education and power together, they would think, oh, well, higher ed leads to empowerment, and that's a great narrative. I love that narrative. But I also want them to think about the ways structures of education dovetail with structures of power in U.S. society. And so we're not just thinking about it in terms of personal transformation and empowerment, although that is an important part of why they're here. I also want them to think about some of the social inequities that get reproduced within systems of education in the U.S.
And that strikes a chord with 34-year-old Kyle Bachman. He essentially grew up in Orange County's criminal justice system.
Most of the schools I went to growing up were probation schools. So it's either you come to school where there's probation officers, and there was also staff that worked for the county, like probation staff. So basically, I felt like if I didn't go, I'm going to get locked up.
Bachman earned his high school diploma in juvenile hall. Later, a carjacking and robbery, along with sentencing enhancements for being in a gang, landed him in state prison with 15 years to life. He takes responsibility for his actions, but he's also beginning to work out some of the larger forces that may have brought him here, thanks to Reeder's class.
I just happened to, bring about discussion like, hey, what do you guys think about, do you see some kind of connection? Like how, the 1%, of the rich family, and the upper elite with the kids of judges and lawyers and, the people that make all this money, how they're taught so differently, than as opposed to the way we're taught. And something I wonder is like, is that same percentage, that 1%, is that same percentage also only in here? Because it's a very small number of people who come from, like I said, that type of environment.
In his own way, Bachman describes philosopher Paulo Freire's seminal theory from Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Freire says oppressed people are educated in a banking system where teachers deposit knowledge without bringing students' strengths and experiences to bear. A better education system, he says, is one where students think critically and work to solve problems.
I'm just able to come up with this basic concept, and I have no way to even look this up on the internet or anything. I got some studies from the 70s, And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm getting a little suspicious here, because the people you're talking about going to the banking system are the type of people that are usually in the surroundings in here, you know.
Bachman says he hopes the class helps him prove to the parole board he can re-enter society. He'd like to become a drug and alcohol counselor. Jason Hicks helps coordinate education programs at Donovan and says the prison benefits too.
The program actually takes place on a general population yard where there's racial politics. And you know, when you go out on the yard on Facility A, you'll see segregation of races. And that sort of disappears when you get into the classroom. You'll notice that, you know, the guys are willing to help each other out from different races and support each other. I think it's really showing rehabilitation, you know, at its best.
And it's expected the benefits of the program might extend beyond the barbed wire. Corrections officials and policymakers are investing in these types of programs to try to bring down the rate of former inmates who struggle on the outside and return to prison. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us and have a great night. And from all of us here at KPBS, Happy New Year.